Why do linen closets always turn into chaos? After years as a professional organizer, I finally cracked the code for a closet that's easy to maintain. In this video, I'm gonna show you how we transformed a client's jam-packed closet in just 5 hours, with clear tips that you can follow at home without the overwhelm. When I first started organizing for clients, I never did much prep and I always regretted it. I was always so pumped to dive in. All I could think about was what I was getting rid of and this beautiful space that we were gonna end up with at the end. But it always came back and bit me in the butt. By the middle of the day, I would have to reset everything and it ended up costing me more time in the end. Step number 1 is simply setting up for success. When we're tackling a client project, we usually spend 20 to 30 minutes on setup. But how much setup is actually required before jumping in? That totally depends on the size of the project. Today's overhaul will require most of the day, which means we dedicated probably about 20 minutes for prepping the area. We set up folding tables in the hallway of the home. We made sure we had a garbage can and a recycle bin. We had blue and black garbage bags, and this day the donations were mostly textiles, so we just had a bunch of clear plastic bags for anything that was going to be donations. When we're doing projects that might have like a fair amount of liquid items, we usually have a box or some sort of tote to carry those as well. For areas like this that are going to have medicine, we usually have a bag that we're going to use for prescription medication that need to be returned to the pharmacy. How much time you spend prepping is going to depend on a few different factors. If you have booked a day off work and you've asked your friend to come over and you guys are finally gonna tackle your basement or your spare room or your primary closet, then it's probably gonna be worth your time to do a bit of prep. But if you are at a stage where all you're doing is spending 5 to 10 minutes at a time doing random spots throughout your house, then all you probably need is your kitchen garbage and maybe a box for outgoing items. Next up is something that takes some time and effort, but it is so worth it. Have you ever looked in a kitchen cupboard that is just jam-packed with the most mismatched random items? And instantly your brain is like, I just don't compute. We can feel our brains actually not being able to sort of distinguish between one item and the other item beside it. Just complete overwhelm immediately. However, the exact same items, if they're laid out on a table in categories, our brain goes, oh, that's what you were talking about. All of a sudden, our brains can see and comprehend what the items are, what they're for. You remember where you came from, why you have them, and then deciding whether to keep them or not is all of a sudden so much easier. It is like night and day. This is why step number 2 is to pull everything out of the closet and sort everything by category. Sometimes our sorting categories are very clear and organized. Sometimes, especially to start, they are very messy and rough. I don't aim for perfection here. Anything is better than trying to stare at your old cough drops in the back of a shelf that you can't even reach. As you can see here, we put items on the tables we set up and we were able to use our client's dining table as well. We normally always cover client like tables or islands or counter with a tablecloth or an old sheet because no matter what space we tackle, it's usually got some fairly messy or sticky stuff in there. Just like a lot of crumbs or pet hair or like liquidy stuff that you don't want on your dining room table. For this project, we were able to get everything onto tables, which is amazing and makes the job so much less physically demanding. However, in real life, we almost always use the floor spaces as well. I also know for a fact that when reviewing items still in the space that we're working on, we let go of so much less. Like if we just stood with our client in front of the closet and said, oh, hey, what about this towel? Or what about this pillowcase? It would be so much harder for her to answer. There's something in our brains that's like, oh, just leave it there, it's fine. But the second we see an item out in the wild on a folding table, we're like, oh my gosh, why was I hanging onto that infant Tylenol that expired in 2013? But do I recommend this step to everyone who's working on their homes on their own? Not necessarily. If you're at home and you're working alone and you know from experience that if you pulled everything out, you would just become completely overwhelmed and give up before the end of the day, that I would say do not do this. With practice, you'll get to know how much and what you can handle and what areas and how much you cannot handle. If you do want to attempt this stage, I suggest starting with something that's super simple, like one drawer, one shelf, one tote. And full transparency, this was one of our more organized sorting spaces. We were able to sort, medication by prescription and over the counter. And we were able to separate towels and the different types of towels and organize them by color and size. But with a lot of the bigger jobs, especially when we're doing a full room, this is the part of the day where I start to have like a low level panic that we are going to run out of time. All I think is that I have just tore this person's house completely apart, and before the end of the day, I have to put everything back together. And even after 3 years of doing this, it still hits me every single time. So if you feel like this when you are tackling a big decluttering project, you are not alone. This is normal. The next step, however, is when ideally you start to feel a small but satisfying shift towards progress. Although I focus on decluttering on this channel, a big part of our job is the actual organization of the space to make sure it's functional and pleasing and works for the family. So creating systems and being strategic about where things go so that they work now and in 5 years from now. And there is one single thing that makes that part of the job easier. And that is owning less, having fewer items in that space, which is why step number 3 is the actual decluttering, making the decisions about what can go and what should stay. For some clients, this is actually the simplest part. Very often it's the starting and the idea of diving in that actually scares people. But once we have everything pulled out and once we're there to support them, they usually go ahead like gangbusters. For this particular client, she was nervous that she had a hard time letting go of things. Right from our first meeting, she kept referring to, loving her treasures, and she felt like everything had a meaning or a purpose, and that even though she knew an item wasn't serving her, she sometimes struggled to let go of things, which is obviously very common with our clients. As you can see, however, that once items were easy to see and we were there to support, she made decisions so quickly. Everything became just so much more logical once it was out there. Like, no, of course I don't want this stained hand towel when I have 20 others to choose from. However, even when we're dealing with an area that is like 99% just for function, like a linen closet, there's still items that like play into the emotions. Like puddle jumpers that are obviously, 5 sizes too small for anyone that lives in this house. But as parents and moms, all we remember are how cute they were when they had these little puddle jumpers and the first time jumping into the pool and how sweet it was. Or those adorable little hooded towels and hooded blankets that, you wrap them up when they were just a few months old. And in a lot of projects, including this one, there's a few ways to make decisions around these items a little bit easier, almost sort of soften the blow. And that is simply to keep a few things. A few things that maybe don't actually get used anymore, but they do hold a lot of emotion, so they're a little bit harder to say goodbye to. In this project, for example, there was a stack of pillowcases that the kids' grandma had made for them, and they had like all their favorite characters from when they were little. I think there was like a little dino one and maybe like a little frozen one, and they didn't get used anymore. However, they were very special for the family. So our client decided to not keep them in the linen closet, but to put them into the basement with other keepsakes in a tote, which is totally fine. In fact, I like that. Obviously, we don't want to just be moving items from one space to the other. But at the same time, it's not always just like all or nothing. Decluttering doesn't mean you need to put everything you own in the backyard and light it on fire. When you're getting started, focusing on items that hold less meaning is going to be so beneficial to build momentum and get the process going. By acknowledging the items that are super special to us, then the things that are more like meh become obvious, and it tends to become easier to let those ones go. All right, the next step is the second time that I usually go into like some sort of low-level panic in my mind. When I start to think, can I fit everything back in here? Did I bring the right bins? Is this even gonna look good at all? And this project was no exception. This closet, as you can see, was a linen closet. However, like a lot of linen closet, it held more than just linens. It was a main area for backstock medicine and bathroom supplies, even some cleaning supplies. Technically, some of these items could have potentially lived in other areas of the home, like a bathroom or a laundry space, but we were not in the position to start tackling other areas of the home simply because of time. And some of you may experience the same thing when you're working on one space. You could easily, be tempted to start meandering into 4 other spaces in the house that store similar items. But this can be dangerous and leave you at the end of the day at 5 p.m. with 5 partially done rooms and your main floor just torn apart. So we focus our energy on this space only. And we dive into the next step, which is where we fit everything back into the closet in a way that makes sense, works for the family long term, and feels calming. When I first start this phase, it can feel really daunting. It feels like what an artist feels like when they look at a blank canvas. And when I start to feel this unease, I always do the exact same thing. I use Post-it notes. I jot down all the categories of items that we need to store, and we use these Post-its to space plan where things could potentially live. The majority of the time, we switch things around another 10 times before we settle on where things are actually gonna live. It's a total game of Tetris every single time. But the Post-it notes at least give me a starting point. Honestly, sometimes it's just the action of writing down the categories that sometimes help. In this case, we had sort of 5 main or broad categories. So we had bedding, we had towels, which included hand towels, face cloths, bath towels. We had backstock, so like beds, cleaning supplies, bathroom supplies. And then we had sort of beach and pool supplies. And luckily, we also had 4 levels of shelving. We started with the bedding. Our client had mentioned that the bedding is mostly just backup. The bedding that they use most on the beds is what's already on the beds, and they simply, wash it and then put it right back on, which we often hear from clients. This meant that we wanted the sheets that are in the closet easy to see and easy to organize, but I also knew she wasn't necessarily pulling them out, every other day, which meant these elastic label bands were perfect for this closet. We've used them once before and they worked really well there too. We also do a very satisfying tuck fold with the sheet so the sets stay together. It's not necessary, but it does, I find, really help to keep everything in one spot, and it makes me very happy. Next was the towels. Our client already had a couple of beautiful baskets that I really wanted to incorporate in the closet. And I love baskets for face cloths and hand towels because it gives you the option during busy phases of life to not fold them. If you're in the middle of the crazy Christmas rush and you think, no way am I gonna fold these towels, you don't have to. And because of the baskets, they still stay organized. The third section was like the medicine and bathroom backstock. We used these white IKEA bins, which we use for 90% of projects because they are just so versatile. The bins helped us corral into 6 categories. So there was like dental backstock, bathroom backstock, and like some medicine and cleaning. But just as importantly, having the bins help the client control what they buy. If they know, for example, that the dental backstock bin is full, they know there's no need to buy more toothpaste until it is empty. Lastly was like the beach and pool stuff. They initially had their swimming stuff in a couple of swim bags, but we wanted baskets so they could easily pull out their bags from behind and toss in like 1 suit and 1 towel per person for their summer day if they're going to a friend's house or for a swim or to the beach. This should make it so much easier to keep track of what they own and make their summer day trips even more fun. The next step is usually my favorite step. This is the part that most people assume is the majority of our job, but in reality, it takes up a very small part of our day. I'm not gonna lie, before I started working for clients, I imagined that the majority of the job was moving things around until they looked cute and it was functional. It's like I knew people had to declutter, but I never really thought of it in the actual real sense. This is phase number 5, and this is where we add labels and keep tweaking until things get 100% beautiful and 100% organized. This can mean something different in every space. For this space, however, we wanted our client to actually be excited about opening this closet. We wanted them to have this one area that felt 100% organized and easy to manage. And we wanted this space to motivate them to keep going with other parts of the house. On the white plastic bins from IKEA, we use the labels that we make on our Dymo label maker. I don't think an average person needs a label maker, but if you are wanting one, I suggest asking around friends and family. You probably already know someone who has one that you could borrow. Another little touch that I like to add are these little wooden label tags. I got a huge pack of them, probably 50 or something off Amazon, I think, but you could easily use cardboard or cardstock. Even in our own hall closet in our own house, I made cardstock labels years ago and we still have them and they still look great. A lot of people see labels as something that's just visual, but I find them so helpful for my brain. The less that I have to think when I'm tidying and organizing and resetting my house, the more likely that I'm going to do it. And this is the stage where we are so happy, but so tired, and all we want to do is go home and take a nap. But we know that we must tackle this final part. When I first started to organize for clients, I was able to schedule my day so that I could still pick up the kids at the end of the day for school. All of our client projects finish at 2 p.m. and school lets out at around 2:45. So it was the perfect buffer. However, within a few weeks, I realized this was never going to happen because after every single job, there was a whole world of behind the scenes afterwards, which is step number 6 today. And although it might sound tedious and boring, it is crucial to actually completing a job because in my experience, a job is not complete until all of the discarded items are where they should be. This includes tidying up the organizing space, loading garbage into the car, donations, recycling, hazardous waste, dropping off the donations, figuring out which pharmacy takes our old EpiPens, figuring out if the Humane Society wants our old towels. This is one of the least talked about parts of decluttering and one of the most consuming parts of our days. And because of that, I've discovered one thing that makes this easier. That is asking for help. Having a second organizer with me all day is beneficial beyond words in countless ways. But one of my favorite things is having that person there to help me with the end of the day. Having a second set of hands to put things away, tidy garbage, load up the products that we didn't end up using, having me decide what should be donated and what should be trash. Even if it's just someone helping you load up your donations or dropping them off for you, or having someone come with a trailer to pick up your scrap metal, whether it's paid help or a family member. Asking for help doesn't mean you are weak. It means you are smart. Okay, that's a wrap, guys. What do you guys think? Do you approve of this transformation? Please let me know if you guys like watching videos like this and I can share more client behind the scenes projects. If you're looking for more decluttering motivation, check out my recent video that is decluttering like you are moving and you can find it right here. Thank you guys so much for watching and I'll see you next one. Bye.